The clinking of champagne glasses echoed through the luxurious room when my sister grabbed my arm and pulled me into a hidden corner. I am Valerie, a 28-year-old single woman, and up until that moment my life had been perfectly peaceful. She looked me dead in the eye and casually delivered the most absurd demand I had ever heard. I'm getting married again. From now on, I want you to raise these 4 girls for me. I stared at her in absolute shock. My parents stood right next to her, nodding in full agreement. They did not reprimand her at all. Instead, they cornered me, pressuring me to sacrifice my own independence just to protect her glamorous future. Think about your sister's future. My dad stepped forward, his voice dropping to a harsh, cold whisper. He made the threat crystal clear. If I refused to take them in, they would call Child Protective Services and throw all 4 children into the foster care system by tomorrow morning. Feeling utterly suffocated, I turned to look at my 4 nieces standing near the doorway. I expected to see tears or panic on their faces. Instead, all 4 of them were smiling calmly. It was a chilling, knowing smile, as if they had already anticipated this exact scenario and were hiding a massive secret that no one else in this room knew. 1 week later, I understood everything. If you want to uncover the dark truth behind those smiles and see how I expose this ultimate family betrayal, please subscribe to the channel and watch until the very end. You definitely do not want to miss this. On Monday morning, a tiny moving truck pulled up in front of my house in the suburbs of Charlotte. The 4 children stepped out onto the driveway carrying their own worn-out fabric suitcases. There was no mountain of toys, no sports equipment, and no expensive clothes. They only brought the absolute bare minimum stuffed tightly into frayed, faded bags. The moment they crossed the threshold into the living room, they did not drop their luggage to explore the new environment. Nor did they rush to claim their bedrooms. Instead, they immediately scattered to find work to do. They moved with a hurried desperation, acting as if they were terrified of being perceived as a useless burden in my home. Maya, the eldest, began wiping down the kitchen counter with a damp rag she had quickly pulled from her own backpack. Layla and Mila started straightening the throw pillows on the couch and aligning the shoes perfectly by the front door. Even little Kira silently collected a few stray magazines from the coffee table. Their movements were highly cautious and timid. They kept their heads down and their shoulders tense, constantly bracing themselves as if waiting to be yelled at. They cleaned the entire living space in absolute silence. None of them asked where the bathroom was, requested a snack after the long drive, or made a single personal demand. I stood in the hallway, completely bewildered by this rigid, military-like discipline. I approached them gently, assuring them that they did not have to do my chores. When I reached out to take the rag from Maya's hand, she flinched and stepped back instantly. The deep abnormality of the situation became glaringly obvious an hour later. Mila walked up to me, maintaining a very safe distance, and stared intently at her own shoes. She whispered softly, asking for permission just to get a glass of tap water from the sink. I was stunned. A few minutes later, Layla stood nervously by the kitchen island. She politely asked if she was allowed to open the refrigerator door to put away a small carton of milk. They treated basic everyday human needs as rare privileges they had to beg for. By the time dinner arrived, the atmosphere in the dining room felt utterly suffocating. I had ordered a large pizza and prepared a fresh salad, hoping a casual meal would ease the heavy tension. It did not work at all. The 4 girls sat rigidly straight at the wooden table. They chewed their food incredibly slowly, keeping their eyes glued firmly to their plates. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the faint sound of forks carefully scraping against porcelain. Occasionally, they would steal quick, anxious glances at my facial expressions. If I shifted my weight in my chair or let out a quiet sigh, they would instantly freeze. They immediately adjusted their posture and ate even slower, desperately trying to make themselves as invisible as possible. After dinner, they quietly retreated to the guest bedroom I had prepared for them. They did not ask to watch television, nor did they argue about who got which bed. The house grew incredibly quiet, almost devoid of life. Around midnight, I walked down the hallway to check on them before going to sleep. As I passed their room, my footsteps paused. The wooden door was left slightly ajar. From within the dark bedroom, I heard a cautious, hushed whisper cutting through the heavy silence. It was Maya speaking to her sisters. "Wait a few more days," she whispered in the darkness. "We still do not know if we can trust her yet." As the first weekend passed, I began to notice abnormal living habits that sent a genuine chill down my spine. I had just returned from the grocery store and tossed the crumpled receipt directly into the kitchen trash can. 10 minutes later, I walked back in to grab a dish towel. Layla was kneeling on the linoleum floor, her bare hands digging actively through the garbage. She quickly pulled out the discarded slip of paper, her small fingers trembling slightly. She smoothed out the wrinkles against the hard countertop with intense, calculated focus. Then she pulled a small, battered notebook from her pocket. She painstakingly recorded every single expense, tracking the numbers down to the last penny. I watched her from the hallway. She was not playing a game. She was tracking the household budget with a desperate urgency, acting as if a single wasted cent would result in severe punishment. I stepped back quietly, turning around so she would not know I saw her. The next morning, I decided to change the bedsheets in their room. While pulling the fitted sheet off Kira's mattress, a heavy plastic bag slipped out and hit the floor with a dull thud. I knelt down and pulled it out from deep under the wooden bed frame. The bag was filled with carefully wrapped half-eaten packets of dry crackers, stale bread crusts, and a few bruised apples. This was not a normal stash for midnight snacks. This was a classic, desperate sign of prolonged food insecurity. Kira had been actively hoarding leftovers, preparing for days when she believed she might not be fed at all. My chest tightened painfully as I held the bag. Later that afternoon, my best friend Chloe came over to drop off some extra blankets for the girls. I went to the kitchen to pour her a cup of coffee, leaving her alone in the living room. Suddenly, Chloe called my name, her voice laced with obvious alarm. I rushed out immediately. Mila was crawling slowly along the wooden baseboards. The 10-year-old was holding a small flashlight, shining the beam directly into the corners of the ceiling behind the television set and under the lampshades. Chloe stood frozen by the sofa, staring in disbelief. Mila was meticulously sweeping the room, actively searching for hidden cameras or concealed recording devices. She wanted to make sure absolutely nobody could hear them. I was still holding the plastic bag of hoarded crackers from that morning, having forgotten to put it away. I stepped forward, lifting the bag slightly, intending to gently ask Kira about it. I did not raise my voice. I did not show any anger. But the moment Maya saw the bag in my hand, her reaction was instantaneous and explosive. She lunged across the room with terrifying speed and positioned herself squarely in front of Kira. Maya spread her arms wide, physically shielding her youngest sister from me. Her eyes locked onto mine, blazing with a fierce, defensive intensity. Her jaw clenched tight, her shoulders bracing for a physical blow. She was entirely prepared to absorb whatever brutal punishment she believed I was about to unleash. Chloe quickly grabbed my elbow and pulled me out onto the front porch, firmly shutting the front door behind us. She took a deep breath, her face completely pale. She helped me realize that these were severe trauma responses from deeply scarred children. She advised me to use extreme patience to approach them. Resolving this situation required me to never raise my voice or apply any additional pressure. "This is absolutely not normal, Valerie," Chloe said. "Kids never act like this unless they are terrified." Exactly at 11 o'clock that night, a remarkably soft knock sounded against my bedroom door. Maya stepped into the room with red, swollen eyes, her small hands trembling as she clutched the edge of her oversized shirt. The patient silence and genuine lack of punishment over the past week had finally shattered her rigid defensive walls. She closed the heavy wooden door carefully behind her and sat on the edge of my mattress, taking a deep, shuddering breath. She had finally decided it was time to reveal the horrifying reality they had been enduring in silence. She recounted the absolute nightmare of living under mom and dad's roof. Marian constantly subjected them to severe emotional abuse, verbally degrading them on a daily basis. She aggressively complained that raising 4 children was a humiliating stain that severely damaged her pristine image in high society. Dad and Mom fully supported this relentless cruelty, treating the 4 young girls like unwanted burdens rather than their own flesh and blood. They were deliberately isolated in the house, forbidden from touching the food in the main refrigerator, and constantly reminded that they were nothing but obstacles to their mother's success. Then Maya revealed a shocking financial truth that explained the core motive behind this entire nightmare. The first father, who had tragically passed away years ago, left behind a substantial trust fund designated specifically for Maya and Layla. Meanwhile, the second father, who had walked out on the family, consistently sent large monthly child support payments to cover the living expenses for Mila and Kira. There was supposed to be hundreds of thousands of dollars legally allocated for their well-being, healthcare, and future education. However, acting as their sole legal guardian, Marian had systematically drained those protected accounts. She ruthlessly diverted the trust fund and the child support money to finance her extravagant, fabricated lifestyle. She forged documents and manipulated banking records to purchase designer handbags, luxury shoes, and expensive cosmetic treatments, meticulously building her wealthy persona for the elite social circles she desperately wanted to join. She completely neglected the basic human needs of her own children, leaving them hoarding stale breadcrumbs in their bedrooms while she shamelessly flaunted her stolen wealth at country clubs. The terrifying motive behind dumping the children at my house suddenly became crystal clear. Marian did not just want a convenient child-free wedding ceremony. She needed to permanently erase the girls from her daily life so she could start a flawless new chapter with her billionaire fiancé. By forcing me to take them in and threatening me with the foster care system, she ensured nobody would ever ask questions about their deteriorating living conditions. She knew that if they stayed hidden with me, no outside agency would ever investigate the missing financial assets. Maya grabbed my hands tightly, her voice cracking as she begged me not to involve the authorities just yet. She knew that if state workers intervened immediately, the 4 sisters would be separated and thrown into different foster homes across the state. More importantly, she swore she knew exactly where Marian and our parents hid the physical evidence of this massive financial fraud. She had been quietly observing their every move for years, memorizing their routines, and waiting for a safe opportunity to expose the truth without risking her sister's safety. She trusted me now, believing I was the only adult who would actually fight for them. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, and delivered a heartbreaking conclusion. Mom spent all the money our dads left for us. We are just a bad image ruining her new life. On Thursday afternoon the following week, the air inside the car felt thick as I parked against the curb exactly 2 blocks away from my parents' house. Taking full advantage of the fact that Dad and Mom were out attending a scheduled social luncheon, Maya and I moved swiftly toward the property. We bypassed the main entrance completely to avoid the front security cameras. Instead, we slipped quietly into the house through a faulty lock on the back door that Maya knew about. We did not waste a single second observing the pristine, luxurious first floor. We moved rapidly up the narrow staircase, heading straight for the cramped, shabby attic bedroom where the 4 girls had been forced to sleep. The room felt incredibly suffocating, retaining a heavy atmosphere of strict isolation. Maya did not hesitate upon entering the room. She dropped to her knees immediately and guided me directly toward a dark corner near the slanted wall. Pointing at a specific loose floorboard, she instructed me to pry it open. I wedged my fingers under the rough, unpolished wood and pulled it upward with a sharp, forceful tug. Beneath the accumulated dust and old cobwebs sat a heavy, rusted metal combination lockbox. Maya quickly spun the dial, her fingers moving with practiced, anxious precision from years of doing this in secret. The metal latch clicked open loudly, revealing the crucial physical clues she had recklessly gathered while living under constant threat. I reached inside the box and pulled out a messy, folded stack of incomplete bank statements. The papers showed massive, unauthorized withdrawals directly from the Children's Trust Fund, though several crucial pages were clearly missing. Beneath the financial documents lay an old, cracked smartphone with a heavily scratched screen. Maya powered it on, instantly opening a hidden audio folder filled with saved voicemails and threatening text messages from Marion. The messages explicitly documented Marion verbally terrorizing the children and casually discussing her financial manipulation with Dad. While this physical evidence was incredibly damning, the files were highly fragmented. These patched-together documents absolutely required a professional lawyer to verify their legal standing and build a solid, irrefutable court case. I was carefully placing the smartphone back into the rusted lockbox when a sharp, unexpected noise shattered the silence. The distinct sound of heavy rubber tires crunching violently against the gravel driveway echoed loudly from outside. My heart dropped into my stomach. Mom and Dad had returned home hours earlier than their usual schedule. Panic flashed across Maya's face as she sprinted toward the narrow attic window to look outside at the front yard. "They are backing into the driveway right now," Maya whispered frantically, grabbing my sleeve and pulling me toward the stairs. "We have to run down and hide in the garage immediately before they open the front door." We had absolutely no time to secure the loose floorboard perfectly. I grabbed the heavy metal box, tucked it under my arm, and we rushed down the attic stairs. We sprinted across the ground floor, slipping quickly through the laundry room. We pushed our way into the dark garage just as the heavy deadbolt of the front door began to turn loudly. We pressed ourselves deeply into a shadowy corner, crouching behind a stack of large cardboard boxes. I wrapped my arms tightly around Maya, pulling her close to my chest to keep her from trembling. We waited in agonizing stillness for 30 minutes, listening to Dad's heavy footsteps pacing in the living room directly above us. Finally, the heavy sliding glass door upstairs rolled open and clicked shut. They had moved out to the backyard garden. Seizing that brief window of opportunity, the two of us silently slipped out the side door of the garage and escaped the property safely. On Monday morning of the third week, I slammed the stack of documents and the old smartphone onto the desk of my lawyer, Felix. Felix immediately began analyzing the fragmented physical evidence we had managed to safely extract from the rusted lockbox. He carefully reviewed every single page of the patched bank statements, meticulously cross-referencing the massive unauthorized withdrawals with the legal dates of the trust fund establishment. After thoroughly scanning the financial records, he plugged the scratched smartphone into his computer system and played the saved voicemails out loud. The audio files were deeply disturbing, but the saved text messages were even more legally damning. They explicitly documented Marion aggressively cursing the young girls, calling them parasitic burdens who ruined her pristine social image. Felix stated that these digital records strongly cemented the undeniable proof of prolonged psychological abuse, providing a perfect foundation for our upcoming aggressive legal battle. Fully recognizing the extreme severity of this financial exploitation, Felix did not waste any time waiting for standard court procedures. He actively began drafting an emergency petition to submit directly to the family court judge. His primary objective was to legally secure a temporary restraining order against all associated financial institutions tied to the children. By freezing the related bank accounts immediately, we could legally block Marion from transferring or hiding the stolen trust fund money into offshore accounts or her wealthy fiancé's sprawling financial portfolio. He looked up from his computer keyboard, his expression dead serious as he handed me a preliminary legal document to sign. "I will file the emergency petition this afternoon," Felix instructed firmly, making sure I fully understood the gravity of our timeline. "Do not say a single word to them until the legal documents are officially served." I nodded silently, fully committing to his strict strategic legal instructions. We then moved forward to complete the massive pile of paperwork required for my official legal intervention. I formally filed a petition for permanent kinship guardianship over Maya, Layla, Mila, and Kira to remove them from her custody entirely. To ensure the judge would grant immediate protective custody, Felix compiled a comprehensive, highly detailed report outlining the systemic financial abuse and severe child neglect. We explicitly laid out how Marian had systematically prioritized her extravagant lifestyle and high society ambitions over the basic survival needs of her biological daughters. The resulting legal narrative painted a clear, undeniable picture of a greedy mother who treated her children as disposable liabilities rather than human beings. Before I finally left his law office, Felix heavily emphasized the absolute necessity of maintaining total secrecy throughout the rest of the week. If Marian or my parents caught even the slightest hint that we were secretly building a massive legal case against them, they would immediately hire aggressive defense attorneys to drag out the process. Worse, they could quickly liquidate their remaining physical assets, completely erasing the money before the judge could formally finalize the freeze order. I had to continue playing the exact role they expected of me, the overwhelmed, obedient aunt who was quietly handling their dirty work without any complaints or suspicions. We spent the final hour of our meeting finalizing our ultimate execution strategy. Instead of making noise beforehand or sending a standard legal notice through the mail, we decided to maximize the real-world consequences of her criminal actions. We would drop the undeniable evidence directly into the hands of Marian's billionaire groom and his highly influential family. We deliberately chose to execute this plan right before the extravagant wedding ceremony began, aiming to deliver a decisive blow that would permanently destroy the fake reality she had so ruthlessly built. Exactly at 5 o'clock on the afternoon of the highly anticipated wedding, Felix and I stood waiting inside the groom's highly secure private dressing room located within the sprawling, luxurious estate. Just 30 minutes before the extravagant ceremony was scheduled to officially commence, Felix had firmly approached the venue's head of private security. He presented his official legal credentials and demanded an immediate, strictly confidential meeting with the billionaire groom to discuss a highly severe legal matter involving immediate financial liabilities. Recognizing Felix's professional authority and fearing potential legal threats to their employer's massive wealth, the security team reluctantly bypassed the wedding planners. They escorted us through the restricted backstage corridors, ushering us into the secluded suite and firmly locking the heavy oak door behind us. Inside the quiet room, the groom looked incredibly impatient and visibly annoyed by the sudden, unprecedented intrusion on his wedding day. Without offering any polite pleasantries, Felix stepped forward and decisively dropped the thick, heavy stack of documented financial fraud directly onto the glass coffee table. He calmly but sternly explained the irrefutable paper trail of the stolen trust funds before plugging a speaker into his laptop to play the retrieved voicemails. I stood completely silent in the corner of the room, closely observing the rapid, dramatic transformation unfolding on the groom's face as the undeniable truth echoed loudly through the space. The groom initially stared at the scattered banking statements with absolute wide-eyed shock, his gaze darting frantically across the highlighted unauthorized withdrawals. However, as he listened to Marian's own recorded voice casually discussing her illegal financial maneuvers and fake persona, his initial disbelief quickly morphed into explosive, uncontainable rage. He realized instantly that he was being heavily deceived by a deeply calculated fraudster who was actively using his immense wealth and elite social status to permanently erase her past financial crimes. He slammed his closed fist down violently against the glass table, his face completely flushed with intense anger as he turned toward his head of security. She lied to me about absolutely everything from money to her actual character. The groom shouted furiously, his voice shaking with pure disgust. Cancel it immediately. There will be no wedding taking place here today. Yet his furious reaction did not stop at the sheer financial deception. His overwhelming anger reached an absolute boiling point when Felix played the final audio clip detailing Marian's vicious, unapologetic verbal abuse toward her 4 young daughters. Hearing the sheer cold-blooded cruelty she displayed in abandoning her own flesh and blood completely shattered the flawless, elegant persona she had meticulously maintained since they met. The groom realized he was not just marrying a selfish financial thief, but a genuinely ruthless, heartless woman who actively viewed her own vulnerable children as nothing more than disposable trash. The perfect, charming illusion of Marian had been entirely destroyed. Without wasting another single second, the groom stormed out of the private suite and marched directly toward the lavishly decorated outdoor garden ceremony. He aggressively bypassed the shocked wedding planner, grabbed a microphone from the podium, and loudly ordered the catering staff and the string quartet to stop playing immediately. The sudden, heavy silence that fell over the hundreds of elite guests was deafening. He publicly announced the immediate cancellation of the event, completely humiliating Marian in front of the exact high society crowd she desperately worshipped and depended on to elevate her social status. Marian collapsed onto the manicured lawn, her pristine white designer gown pooling around her as she began screaming in absolute hysterical devastation. The wealthy guests exchanged harsh whispers, rapidly gathering their belongings and abandoning the ruined venue while Felix and I quietly exited through the side gates, leaving her to face her own destruction. 6 weeks after the disastrous, abruptly cancelled wedding day, the intense family court trial concluded with undeniable and highly appropriate legal verdicts. Marian found herself sitting silently in the courtroom facing severe felony fraud charges, alongside multiple confirmed counts of the financial exploitation of minors. The relentless legal investigation rapidly exposed her extensive network of forged guardianship documents and hidden banking transfers. Consequently, the presiding judge immediately ordered all of her personal bank accounts, luxury physical assets, and remaining investment portfolios to be strictly frozen. Every single designer item she had purchased with stolen money was legally seized and auctioned to ensure full financial restitution for the children's drained trust funds. She was entirely stripped of the wealthy, glamorous life she had brutally sacrificed her own biological daughters to achieve. Mom and Dad also suffered catastrophic, irreversible consequences for their cruel complicity and active cover-up. Once the damning audio recordings of their conversations were played publicly in the courtroom, they completely lost their prestigious standing in their elite social circles. Facing immense public humiliation and aggressive legal scrutiny, they were utterly disgraced and shunned by their former wealthy peers. Furthermore, to guarantee the absolute safety of the girls, the judge firmly issued a strict long-term restraining order against both of them. My parents are now legally prohibited from approaching, calling, or attempting to contact the children in any physical or digital form, completely severing their deeply toxic influence forever. Following the criminal rulings, I officially won full permanent legal custody of Maya, Layla, Mila, and Kira without any further opposition. Transitioning into a genuinely safe and deeply supportive environment in Charlotte, the 4 young girls finally began to shed their heavy, rigid defensive walls. They stopped hoarding stale food under their beds and no longer felt the desperate need to meticulously record every grocery receipt. Slowly but surely, genuine smiles began replacing their anxious, terrified expressions. They started laughing out loud, playing freely in the backyard, and acting like normal children, gradually healing from the profound psychological trauma. To fiercely protect this beautiful new reality, I made the unwavering decision to permanently cut all ties with my toxic blood relatives. I blocked their phone numbers, ignored their desperate apology letters, and completely removed their negative presence from our daily lives without any regret. My entire focus and life's purpose are now firmly dedicated to protecting these 4 incredible girls and aggressively building a stable, loving, and highly secure future for our family of 5. This harrowing journey has taught me a brutal but incredibly necessary truth about life and human relationships. Sharing the exact same bloodline does not grant anyone the automatic right to deeply hurt, manipulate, or exploit you. A true family consists of the loyal people who fiercely protect you during your absolute darkest moments, not the selfish individuals who ruthlessly use you to satisfy their own endless greed and vanity. Most importantly, society must never ignore the terrifying, unnatural silence of young children. Extreme obedience and forced maturity are rarely signs of excellent parenting. They are frequently silent, desperate cries for help stemming from the worst psychological trauma inflicted by trusted adults. Genuine justice and healing can only truly begin when we find the profound courage to drag the darkest, ugliest lies out into the harsh light of day. Thank you so much for staying with me and listening to the deeply turbulent story of my family until the very last second. I truly appreciate your continued emotional support and empathy throughout this challenging journey. Please share your honest thoughts and personal opinions on how I handled this incredibly difficult situation down in the comments below. And do not forget to hit the subscribe button to support my channel.